The storm outside mirrored the tempest in his soul. Kaelen Blackwood, alpha of the most powerful pack on the entire West Coast, stood as a silent sentinel before the wall of glass in his penthouse office. Rain lashed against the pane, distorting the glittering lights of Silverwood City below. A city that slept in ignorant peace, unaware of the world of wolves that moved like shadows through its heart. At 38 years of age, he commanded respect not with words, but with a presence that could freeze the blood in a man's veins. He was a fortress of silence and controlled fury, a man forged in the fires of loss and betrayal. Widowed young, his heart had turned to stone, leaving him with only two legacies: his immense power and his profound, aching silence. The soft chime of the intercom broke the quiet. "Alpha," came the respectful voice of his beta, Liam. Elara called. "Young Leo has had another episode. He's locked himself in the closet again and won't come out for anyone." Kaelen's jaw tightened, a nearly imperceptible movement. His 6-year-old son, Leo. The boy had been a vibrant, laughing child, a carbon copy of his mother. But since her tragic passing 2 years ago, a silence had fallen over him too. He spoke in whispers, if he spoke at all, and flinched from the touch that was meant to comfort him. The nightmares had become a relentless plague, and no therapist, no pack elder, nothing had been able to reach the little boy trapped inside his own grief. "Cancel my remaining appointments for the day," Kaelen commanded, his voice a low rumble that carried the weight of absolute authority. He didn't need to raise it. When the alpha spoke, the pack obeyed. The drive to his secluded compound was a blur of winding coastal roads and towering redwoods. The estate was more than a home, it was a sanctuary, a fortress that housed not only his family but his most trusted warriors, 30 wolves bound to him by blood and bone. He found Leo exactly as described. Curled into a tiny, trembling ball in the dark confines of his bedroom closet, his small shoulders shaking with silent, heart-wrenching sobs. The sight was a physical blow to Kaelen. His son's bright blue eyes, so like his mother's, were now pools of a sorrow no child should ever know. "Was it the dream again, little wolf?" Kaelen asked, his voice dropping to a gentler register as he knelt, his large frame filling the doorway. Leo nodded, a hiccup escaping his small body. "Mama was singing the star song. But then the wind came, and she was gone. It was so quiet, Papa. So quiet." Kaelen's heart clenched so tightly he could scarcely breathe. Elara. Her voice had been a living thing, a melody that could calm the fiercest storm, both in the weather and in the soul. Her lullabies had been Leo's anchor. Now, in the terrible, hollow silence her death had left behind, there was no music. There was only the echo of a song long forgotten. He reached in and gathered his son into his arms, holding the trembling child close. "I am here, Leo. I will always be here." But his embrace, though strong and protective, felt like a poor substitute for the comfort of a mother's song. He could fight any enemy, dominate any rival, but he could not sing away his son's fears. As night deepened, blanketing the compound in a velvety darkness, Kaelen felt a restless energy stir within him. His wolf, usually a dormant force under his iron control, was pacing. Something was wrong. At precisely 11:52 p.m., his enhanced hearing, sharper than any human's, caught the faint, almost silent creak of his son's bedroom door. He was on his feet in an instant, moving with a predator's silence through the moonlit corridors. Leo's room was empty, the window open, the cool night air carrying the scent of rain-dampened earth and his son. A spike of pure, undiluted panic, an emotion he rarely allowed himself, shot through Kaelen's chest. Leo had never, ever left the compound alone. Shifting partially, he let his wolf's senses take over. The world exploded into a tapestry of scent. There it was, Leo's unique signature, a trail of fear and determination leading away from the safety of packlands and toward the edge of the city, where the late-night world of humans was just waking up. The trail led him to a place called the Moonlight Diner, a cozy, slightly worn establishment that glowed like a beacon in the dark. Through the rain-streaked window, his heart hammering against his ribs, he saw his son. Leo was sitting alone in a vinyl booth, his small form looking impossibly fragile, tears streaming down his pale cheeks. But he was not alone. A young woman was kneeling beside the booth, her back to the window. She wore a simple waitress uniform, a dark ponytail cascading down her back. Her posture was one of gentle concern, not pity. Her name tag, though he couldn't read it from here, seemed to glow under the diner's lights. And she was humming. Kaelen froze, his hand on the door handle. He had been prepared to storm inside, to grab his son and vanish before any questions could be asked. But the sound stopped him dead. It wasn't Elara's song, but the melody was soft, ancient, and filled with a kindness that seemed to physically warm the air around them. And impossibly, miraculously, as he watched, Leo's crying slowed. The tense little shoulders relaxed. The boy leaned slightly toward the woman, his sobs quieting into sniffles. For the first time in 2 years, Kaelen felt his wolf stir. Not with the familiar burn of rage or territorial instinct, but with something far more dangerous. Something that felt terrifyingly like recognition. Like the first note of a song it had been waiting its entire life to hear. He watched, utterly captivated, as this stranger, this human woman, did what he, the great Alpha Kaelen Blackwood, had been powerless to do. She soothed his son with nothing but a hum. And as he stood there on the wet sidewalk, a king outside his own kingdom, Kaelen felt the first crack appear in the fortress around his heart. The clock on the diner wall read 12:08 a.m., and in that single, silent moment, everything he knew about his world began to irrevocably shift. Elara's feet ached with a familiar, throbbing pain that came from a double shift. At 28, she was accustomed to the grind, saving every tip to keep a roof over her head in her tiny studio apartment. Life had taught her to be resilient, to recognize the shadows people carried in their eyes. And the little boy crying in booth 4, he had shadows deeper than any she had ever seen. She approached him not as a waitress, but as someone who understood what it was to feel utterly alone. "Hey there," she said softly, her voice a gentle melody even in speech. She slid into the seat across from him, careful not to invade his space. "I'm Elara. What's your name?" The child looked up, and her breath caught. His eyes were the color of the summer sky, but rimmed with red and filled with a grief that shattered her heart. "Leo," he whispered, his voice hoarse from crying. I lost my mama's song." Something twisted deep within Elara's chest. She had grown up in the system, shuffled from one foster home to another. She knew the particular, hollow ache of a child searching for something, for someone, that felt forever out of reach. "Where did you hear it last?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. "In my dreams," Leo confessed, a fresh tear tracing a path down his cheek. "She used to sing to me when I was scared. But now she's gone, and everything is just quiet. The quiet is so loud." Without a second thought, driven by an instinct she didn't understand, Elara began to hum. It was an old Gaelic lullaby, one her Irish grandmother had sung to her during the brief, golden year they had lived together before she was taken away. The melody was one of hearth and home, of protection and unwavering love. It seemed to weave through the fluorescent lit air of the diner, creating a fragile bubble of peace around their booth. Leo's eyes widened, the storm in them clearing for a moment, replaced by pure, unadulterated wonder. You sound like her," he breathed, his voice filled with awe. The bell above the diner door chimed, a sharp, intrusive sound in their quiet moment. Elara looked up, and her world tilted. A man filled the doorway. He was tall. Impossibly so, with a breadth of shoulder that seemed to block out the night behind him. His hair was the color of dark espresso, and his eyes, they were not human. They were a striking, luminous gold, and they were fixed on Leo with an intensity that made the air itself feel thin. "Papa," Leo whispered, scrambling out of the booth and running to the man. The stranger looked too formidable, too dangerously sharp-edged to be anyone's father. But the way he moved, the way he dropped to one knee and gathered Leo against his chest, spoke of a protectiveness so fierce it was almost tangible. It was the motion of a wolf gathering its cub. When those golden eyes lifted from his son and settled on Elara, she felt a jolt, like a static shock that traveled from her fingertips straight to her soul. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was significance. As if a missing piece of a puzzle she never knew she was trying to solve had just clicked into place. "Thank you," the man said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that carried an accent she couldn't place, something ancient and wild. "For watching over him. He's a very special boy," Elara replied, standing slowly, feeling strangely exposed under his penetrating gaze. "I'm Elara Vance." Kaelen, he said simply. Kaelen Blackwood. The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it, with such inherent authority, suggested it should mean everything. Around them, the few late-night patrons had fallen silent, instinctively sensing the shift in the atmosphere, the presence of a predator in their midst. "How can I repay your kindness?" Kaelen asked, his voice formal, yet the intensity in his eyes made the question feel deeply personal. Elara shook her head, a strand of dark hair escaping her ponytail. "No repayment is necessary. Just make sure he gets home safe. That's all that matters." As Kaelen stood, lifting Leo effortlessly into his arms, the little boy looked back over his father's broad shoulder. His blue eyes were earnest, pleading. "Miss Elara, will you sing for me again sometime? Please?" The question hung in the air. Elara looked from the hopeful child to the guarded, powerful man who held him. Something in her, some deep-seated instinct, told her that saying yes would change everything. But looking into Leo's eyes, she found she couldn't say no. "Anytime you need me to, Leo," she promised, her voice soft but sure. She didn't see the way Kaelen's breath hitched at her words. She didn't see the way his arms tightened almost imperceptibly around his son. She only watched as they disappeared into the rainy night, the diner door swinging shut with a final, soft chime. The clock above the counter struck 1:17 a.m. Elara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling the chill of the night. She had no why of knowing that her simple promise, given from the heart, had just set 3 destinies on a collision course from which there was no return. 3 days passed. 72 hours and 26 minutes, to be precise, before Kaelen returned to the Moonlight diner. This time, he came alone. Elara was refilling salt shakers during the slow lull between lunch and dinner when the bell chimed. She didn't need to look up to know who had entered. The air in the diner changed, growing still and charged, as if a thunderstorm had just walked in. She looked up to find Kaelen Blackwood standing just inside the door, his golden eyes scanning the room before landing on her. He was dressed not in the casual clothes from the other night, but in a suit that probably cost more than her car. It did nothing to soften his wild, predatory edge. "We need to talk," he said without preamble, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the diner. He moved to the very booth where she had comforted Leo and slid into the seat, his presence making the vinyl booth seem like a throne. Elara set down the salt shaker, wiping her hands on her apron. "About Leo? Is he all right?" "He hasn't stopped asking for you," Kaelen stated bluntly. His gaze was direct, unnerving. "He wants to know if you'll come to our home. For dinner." The request was so far outside the realm of anything she had expected that Elara could only stare for a moment. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't even know you. Your family." "You calmed him," Kaelen interrupted, his voice low and intense. "When nothing and no one else could. His therapist says he's spoken more in the last 3 days than in the previous 6 months. He drew a picture. He called it, The Lady with the Song." Elara's heart squeezed. Children respond to genuine care. It's not magic. Kaelen's lips quirked in a humorless, almost challenging smile. "Isn't it?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Elara felt a shiver dance down her spine. There was something about this man, about his world, that she didn't understand. Something hidden just beneath the surface. "Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate the invitation, but he doesn't just want you there," Kaelen said, his voice dropping even lower, becoming almost intimate. "I find myself curious about the woman who could effect such a profound change with nothing but a hum." His words, his intense focus, made her pulse flutter wildly. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, by someone who missed absolutely nothing. "Just dinner," he added, as if reading the hesitation in her eyes. "Just dinner," she repeated, needing the reassurance. "Just dinner," he confirmed. "Though I should warn you, my household is unconventional." "Unconventional how?" Elara asked, her curiosity now thoroughly piqued. Kaelen's smile this time was a little warmer, but it still held secrets. "You'll see." He stood, placing a stark white business card on the table. The logo was elegant, minimalist, a stylized wolf's head in silver, above the words, Blackwood Industries. "Saturday, at 7. I'll send a car." Before Elara could formulate a protest, he was heading for the door. "I don't even know where you live," she called after him. The ghost of a smile touched his lips as he glanced back. The driver will know, Miss Vance. He paused, his hand on the doorframe. And wear something comfortable. The people you'll meet, they don't care much for formality. And then he was gone, leaving her alone with the business card, her racing heart, and a whirlwind of questions. Saturday was 3 days away. It felt like both an eternity and no time at all. The Blackwood estate was nothing short of breathtaking. The car, driven by a sharp-eyed woman named Anya, had wound its way up a long, private driveway lined with ancient redwoods, finally revealing the main house. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, soaring glass walls, clean lines, and warm wood that seemed to grow organically from the landscape, all glowing with a soft, welcoming light in the gathering twilight. "It's incredible," Elara breathed, her face pressed to the window. "Alpha Kaelen designed much of it himself," Anya said from the driver's seat, a note of pride in her voice. After his mate passed, he wanted to create a true home for the boy. A sanctuary. The word, sanctuary, echoed in Elara's mind as the car came to a smooth stop. Before she could even open her door, it was wrenched open from the outside. "Miss Elara, you came." Leo stood there, beaming, his earlier sorrow completely erased by pure, unadulterated joy. He threw his small arms around her waist the moment she stepped out, and Elara felt something hard and protective in her heart simply melt away. "Of course I came, sweetheart," she said, ruffling his soft brown hair. "I promised, didn't I?" She looked up to find Kaelen approaching more slowly. He was dressed in dark, comfortable trousers and a simple sweater that did little to disguise the powerful frame beneath. His golden eyes took her in, from her simple lavender dress to her nervous smile, and he gave a slight, approving nod. "Welcome to our home," he said, his voice warmer than she'd heard it before. "Thank you for having me," Elara replied, her eyes still drinking in the stunning surroundings. She noticed then the other people. They were emerging from the various smaller buildings that dotted the property, men and women of all ages, all sharing a certain quality. A watchfulness, a fluid grace in their movements. They didn't just walk past Kaelen, they acknowledged him with slight odds, a subtle deference that was impossible to miss. "You have a very large family," Elara commented quietly as Kaelen led her and Leo toward the main entrance. "Something like that," he agreed, his hand resting protectively on his son's shoulder. "Shall we go inside?" The interior was even more impressive. It was warm and lived in, filled with books and art and comfortable furniture, but the undercurrent of immense wealth and power was undeniable. What struck Elara most, however, was the way everyone moved around Kaelen. It was exactly like those nature documentaries about wolf packs, the subtle body language of respect, the way they made space for him without being asked. As they walked toward the dining room, a man with silver at his temples and kind eyes approached. "Alpha," he said respectfully. "The perimeter sweep is complete. All is quiet." "Thank you, Marcus," Kaelen replied with a nod. Elara glanced at Kaelen. "Alpha?" she asked quietly. "Are you some kind of boss?" "You could say that," he replied, his tone carefully neutral. "I run a security consulting firm. Most of the people here work for me." It wasn't exactly a lie, she supposed, but it felt like a fraction of the truth. The dining room held a long table, but it was set for only 3 places, creating an intimate space within the grand room. "I wanted tonight to be just us," Kaelen explained, noting her surprise. Dinner was a surprisingly relaxed affair. The food was simple but exquisite, and Leo chattered happily, asking her about her work and telling her about his lessons. But it was Kaelen who held her attention. When he looked at his son, the harsh lines of his face softened, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the formidable exterior. The loving father, the grieving widower. "Your son is remarkable," Elara said when Leo excused himself to fetch a drawing. "He is," Kaelen agreed, his gaze following the boy. "He has his mother's spirit. You loved her very much." It wasn't a question. A shadow crossed Kaelen's features, dark and complex. "I thought I did. I was wrong about many things." Before Elara could ask what he meant, Leo returned with an armful of colorful drawings, and the moment was lost. But the comment settled in her mind, another piece of the puzzle that was Kaelen Blackwood. After dinner, Kaelen led them to a large common area where a dozen or so people had gathered. The conversation died instantly when they entered. Every eye turned to assess her. Everyone, Kaelen said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. This is Elara Vance. Elara, these are some of my closest colleagues. A woman with severe features and intelligent dark eyes stepped forward. I am Isabel Chen, she said, her smile polite but her gaze analytical. Head of security. We've heard about your kindness to Leo. He's an easy boy to be kind to, Elara replied honestly, meeting the woman's assessing stare without flinching. Indeed, Isabel said, her head tilting slightly. Children are often the best judges of character. More introductions followed. A man named Ronan with scars on his knuckles. A young woman named Maya who moved with a dancer's grace. The elderly Marcus. Each greeting was polite, but guarded. They were all waiting, watching her. Miss Elara? Leo tugged on her hand, his voice hopeful. Can you sing the song? The one from the diner? Please? Everyone wants to hear how pretty your voice is. Elara felt a blush creep up her cheeks. She glanced around at the circle of watching, waiting faces, then at Kaelen. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Settling into a large armchair with Leo on her lap, she took a soft breath and began to hum the same Gaelic lullaby. The effect was immediate and profound. It was as if a visible wave of relaxation washed through the room. Tension drained from postures, stern expressions softened. Even Ronan, who had been standing like a coiled spring, seemed to settle. When the last note faded, a deep, reverent silence filled the room. It was Marcus who broke it, his voice filled with awe. Remarkable, he murmured. Truly remarkable. What is? Elara asked, confused by the intensity of their reaction. Nothing, Kaelen said quickly, a warning look flashing to his pack. Just a beautiful voice. But Elara wasn't fooled. She saw the meaningful glances exchanged between the others. The way they looked at her now was different. It was no longer simple assessment, it was something closer to awe, to reverence. Whatever had just happened, it was far more significant than anyone was letting on. Later, as Anya drove her back to the city, Elara couldn't shake the feeling. What happened back there? She finally asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Everyone acted like I'd performed a miracle. Anya met her eyes in the rearview mirror, her expression unreadable. Perhaps you did, child, she said softly. Perhaps you did. But she offered no further explanation, leaving Elara with more questions than answers, and the unshakable certainty that her life had just been irrevocably changed. 2 weeks slipped by in a beautiful, bewildering blur. 14 days of evenings that transformed Elara's understanding of family. What had started as a single dinner invitation became a routine. She would finish her shift at the diner, and Kaelen's car would be waiting. Evenings were spent in the warm, vibrant heart of the Blackwood compound. Leo blossomed under her attention. His whispers became animated stories about everything from planets to prehistoric sharks. But it was Kaelen who truly captivated Away from the diner's harsh lights, she began to notice the details. The way his golden eyes seemed to capture and hold the light. The predatory grace in his movements, a contained power that hummed just beneath his civilized exterior. The way his pack moved around him, a living testament to his leadership. Tell me about your work, she asked one evening as they walked through the moonlit gardens, watching Leo chase flickering fireflies. Security consulting? It's a broad field, Kaelen replied, his standard, evasive answer. We provide protection. And all these people work for you? Elara pressed gently. They are under my protection, he corrected, his voice taking on a deeper, more solemn tone. Elara stopped walking, turning to face him. You're being deliberately vague, Kaelen. Some things are complex, Elara. Some truths are better revealed slowly. His voice carried a warning, but it was not unkind. Would knowing the full truth change how you see us? How you see Leo? I don't know, she answered honestly. Would it? Instead of answering, he called out to his son. Leo, time for bed, little wolf. The nickname made Elara smile. Little wolf? His mother called him that, Kaelen said softly, a shadow of old pain in his eyes. He's always had an affinity for them. Books, documentaries. Elara said he had the heart of a wolf. Elara, his late wife. The ghost that lingered in the halls of this beautiful house. What happened to her, Kaelen? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kaelen's expression closed off, becoming the impenetrable fortress once more. She made choices, he said, his voice like gravel. Choices that put our family in grave danger. In the end, those choices cost her everything. The raw, unvarnished pain in his voice was a physical thing. Without thinking, driven by a compassion she couldn't contain, Elara reached out and covered his hand with hers. The contact was electric. A jolt of pure energy shot up her arm, and she saw Kaelen's eyes widen in shock. For a moment, they were frozen, her small, warm hand resting on his large, calloused one. "Papa, can Miss Elara read me a story?" Leo's voice broke the spell, and Kaelen slowly, almost reluctantly, pulled his hand away. "If she would like to," he said, his voice unusually husky. Reading to Leo became another cherished ritual. The little boy would curl against her side, his small body warm and trusting, while Kaelen watched from the doorway, his golden eyes unreadable. Tonight's book was about a lone wolf who, after a long journey, found his pack. The parallels were not lost on Elara. When Leo finally fell asleep, his breathing deep and even, Kaelen walked her to the waiting car. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice sincere. "For giving him something I could." "NT. What's that?" Elara asked, looking up at him. "Peace," Kaelen replied simply. "He laughs now. He dreams without screaming. Because of you." The drive home left Elara lost in thought. The Blackwood household was a world unto itself, a collection of strong, capable people who had formed their own fierce, loyal family. And at its center was Kaelen, a man of immense complexity, carrying burdens she could only begin to fathom. She was falling for him. The realization struck her as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, making her heart stutter and her hands tremble. Kaelen Blackwood was dangerous, not because of his mysterious work, but because of the way he made her feel, seen, valued, and protected in a way she had never known. The question that haunted her was whether he felt the same, or if she was simply a convenient source of comfort for his son. The first crack in their idyllic new normal appeared on a chilly Wednesday night. Elara emerged from the diner's back entrance at 10:48 p.m., heading toward her beat-up sedan, when two figures detached themselves from the shadows of the alley. "Elara Vance," one of them said, his voice smooth, with a slight European accent. "We need to have a word." Every instinct screamed at her to run. They were large, impeccably dressed, but their eyes held a cold, calculating emptiness. "I'm sorry, I don't know you," she said, taking a step back toward the diner's door. "But we know you," the second man said, stepping closer, cutting off her retreat. "The human woman who has caught the attention of Kaelen Blackwood. That makes you very interesting to certain parties." A third man materialized from the darkness behind her, blocking her escape completely. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "What do you want?" she demanded, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "Information," the first man said smoothly. "About the Blackwood compound. Their routines, their security, how many live there." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Elara lied, her mind racing. "Of course you do," he purred. "You've been a regular visitor for weeks. Surely you've noticed things. The way they move. Their unique characteristics." Before she could respond, a low, guttural growl echoed from the mouth of the alley. It was a sound that didn't belong in the human world. It was primal, ancient, and promised violence. The three men spun around, their confident masks slipping into alarm. Kaelen stood there, silhouetted by a distant streetlight. He seemed larger somehow, his form bleeding into the shadows around him. His eyes were no longer just golden, they were glowing with an inner, feral light. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice a silken threat that vibrated with power. "You seem to be lost." The leader of the group wallowed hard. "Blackwood, we were just having a conversation with your friend." "You were threatening my guest," Kaelen corrected, taking a step forward. The air grew thick, heavy with a pressure that made it hard to breathe. "That was your first mistake. Your last mistake would be remaining in my territory." The men exchanged nervous glances. The raw, untamed power rolling off Kaelen was something they clearly hadn't anticipated. "We meant no offense," the leader stammered. "You meant to harm what is under my protection," Kaelen snarled, and this time, Elara could have sworn she saw his teeth elongate, just for a fraction of a second. "Leave, now, and carry a message to your master. If he sends anyone near her again, I will not be so diplomatic." The three strangers didn't need to be told twice. They melted back into the darkness, their retreat hurried and undignified. Kaelen stood perfectly still until their scent had faded from the air, then he was at Elara's side in an instant. His hands came up to frame her face, his touch surprisingly gentle despite the rage still burning in his eyes. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. "I'm fine," she managed, though she was shaking. "Kaelen, who were they? What did they want?" "Rivals," he said grimly, his thumb stroking her cheek absently. "They won't bother you again." "How can you be sure?" "Because they now understand the consequences," he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Before she could ask another question, he was guiding her firmly toward his own car, parked a few feet away. "You're coming back to the compound tonight. It's not safe for you to be alone." "Kaelen, I can't just—" "Yes," he interrupted, his voice brooking no argument. "You can. And you will. Until I am certain the threat has been neutralized, you stay where I can protect you." The drive to the compound was tense and silent. When they arrived, Kaelen immediately called a meeting with Isabel and Ronan. Elara waited in the common room, catching snippets of their hushed, urgent conversation. "Darius is testing us," she heard Isabel say. "Then he's about to learn the price of that test." Kaelen's reply was cold, final. When the meeting ended, Kaelen found her curled on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. "The guest room is ready for you," he said gently. "Who is Darius?" Elara asked instead of moving. Kaelen's jaw tightened. "Someone who has just made a fatal error in judgment." "By threatening me?" she pressed. "By threatening what is mine," Kaelen said, the possessiveness in his tone both alarming and, to her surprise, deeply stirring. "Yours?" she whispered. "Yes," he said, his golden eyes holding hers captive. "Mine to protect. Mine to care for. Mine to—" He stopped, running a hand through his dark hair. A rare show of frustration. "Yours to what, Kaelen?" Elara stood, the blanket falling away. He looked at her for a long, heart-stopping moment, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Mine to cherish," he said, his voice raw with an emotion that stole her breath. "If you'll allow it." The quiet confession hung between them, charged with weeks of growing closeness and the night's stark reminder of the dangers of his world. "Kaelen," she breathed. "I know it's complicated," he said quickly. "I know there are things about my life, about who I am, that you don't understand. But what I feel for you, that is simple. That is the most real thing I have felt in years." Elara crossed the room until she stood before him. She reached up and placed her hand over his heart, feeling its strong, steady beat beneath her palm. "Then show me," she said softly. "Show me who you are." Kaelen's breath caught in his chest. Her hand was so small against him, a point of warmth that seemed to seep straight through his skin and into the cold, lonely places he had carried for so long. To show her who he was, it was the one thing he both desperately wanted and deeply feared. "What you saw tonight," he began, his voice low and careful. "The men, my reaction, it was not entirely human, Elara." Her eyes, those deep, understanding pools, didn't flinch. "I know. You know? I've seen the way your people move, Kaelen. The way they listen, the way they watch. I've seen the way you command respect without ever raising your voice. I've noticed that you never seem to feel the cold, that you can hear a whisper from across a crowded room. And your eyes?" She reached up, her fingers hovering just beside his temple. "Sometimes, in the right light, they glow." He stood perfectly still, stunned by her perception. She had not been fooled by the veneer of normalcy. She had been watching, learning, seeing the truth he tried so hard to conceal. "If you know," he whispered, the words feeling like a confession, "then you must understand how dangerous my world is. The threat tonight was real. Darius leads a rival pack. He sees you as a vulnerability, a way to get to me." "Then teach me," Elara said, her voice steady and sure. "I'm not running, Kaelen. Whatever this is between us, whatever dangers come with it, I am not running. But I won't be a liability, either. I won't be the reason you or anyone in your pack gets hurt." Her courage awed him. He had expected fear, retreat, the logical human response to the supernatural. Instead, he found a fortress of strength. He covered her hand with his own, pressing it more firmly against his heart. "My world is one of ancient laws and older instincts," he said. "We are not just men and women who live together. We are a pack, bound by blood and loyalty. I am Ire Alpha, their protector, their leader. And Leo, he will one day inherit this responsibility. He will carry the wolf within him. He watched her face, waiting for the dawning horror, the rejection. It never came. Instead, a soft, wondrous smile touched her lips. It explains so much, she murmured. The connection you all share. The way Leo responds to things, it all makes sense now. You believe me? The question was a plea. I believe you, Kaelen, she said. And I see the love in this house. I feel the loyalty in this pack. That is not the work of monsters. That is the work of family. The last of his defenses crumbled. For 2 years, his wolf had been a silent, grieving shadow within him. But in her presence, he felt it stir, not with rage, but with a sense of homecoming. It recognized her. It recognized its missing piece. My wolf, he said, the term feeling both strange and right on his tongue, has been silent since Elara's death. Her betrayal, it broke something in me. But the moment you sang to my son, he stirred. And when those men threatened you tonight, he nearly took control for the first time in years. What does that mean? Elara asked, her voice full of awe, not fear. It means, Kaelen said, his voice rough with emotion, that you have awakened something in me I thought was lost forever. It means my wolf recognizes you as ours. Yours, she repeated softly, the word a promise. If you'll have us, he whispered, his forehead coming to rest against hers. Her answer was to lean into him, her arms wrapping around his waist, holding him with a strength that belied her size. It was not a kiss, but something more profound. A silent vow, an acceptance of all he was, and all he would ever be. In that quiet embrace, surrounded by the sleeping pack, Kaelen Blackwood felt the first true peace he had known in a lifetime. The morning sun streamed into the guest room, painting golden stripes across the floor. Elara woke with a start, the events of the previous night rushing back to her. Werewolves, rival packs, a confession that had reshaped her entire world. A soft knock came at the door. Miss Elara, are you awake? Papa made pancakes. Leo's voice was a balm to her swirling thoughts. I'm awake, sweetheart, she called back, quickly dressing. She found them in the kitchen, a scene of such perfect, domestic harmony it made her heart ache. Kaelen, the formidable alpha, was wielding a spatula with intense concentration while Leo carefully set 3 places at the small breakfast nook. Good morning, Kaelen said, his golden eyes searching her face. She saw the question in them. Any regret? Any fear? Good morning, she replied, accepting the mug of coffee he offered. Their fingers brushed, and the same electric warmth from the night before passé. Between them, I slept, surprisingly well. Better than I have in years, he admitted quietly. Breakfast was filled with Leo's cheerful chatter, but Elara could feel the undercurrent of tension. The threat of Darius was not gone, it had only been pushed back. As if summoned by her thoughts, the back door opened and Isabel strode in, her expression grim. We have a problem, she said without preamble. One of our scouts just reported in. They found a body on the edge of our territory. One of Darius's wolves. The kill was messy, brutal. Kaelen's posture shifted instantly from relaxed father to lethal alpha. A message. And there's more, Isabel continued, her eyes flicking to Elara with clear unease. A human couple camping in the state park reported seeing a large, dark-furred wolf near the scene. Their description, it matches Leo's coloring. Ice flooded Elara's veins. Leo? But he was here all night. He was, Kaelen confirmed, his voice a low growl. But his enhanced senses were already scanning the compound, searching for his son's unique scent. His face paled. His trail leads toward the main gate. He's not here. Before the panic could fully take root, Elara's phone, which she'd left on the counter, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Her blood ran cold as she read it aloud. The pup is curious. He followed a pretty butterfly right into my hands. Pier 49. 1 hour. Come alone, Alpha, or the sea will swallow his song forever. The sound that ripped from Kaelen's throat was pure, undiluted wolf. A snarl of such primal rage that the windows in the kitchen rattled. Darius, he growled, his hands curling into fists, his knuckles white. We go together, Elara said immediately, her voice trembling but firm. No. Kaelen's voice was absolute. This is exactly what he wants. To use you as a weapon against me. Then we give him what he wants, Elara said, her own fear hardening into a fierce, protective resolve. But on our terms, not his. She looked from Kaelen's tormented face to Leo's empty chair. The little boy who called her Mama Elara in his heart. The child who had trusted her with his deepest fears. He is my son too, in every way that matters, she said, the truth of the words ringing in the air. I am not letting that monster have him. We do this together, Kaelen. Or not at all. Kaelen stared at her, and in her eyes, he did not see a fragile human. He saw a Luna. He saw his equal. Together, he agreed, the word a solemn vow. The clock was ticking. Leo's life hung in the balance, and the trap was set. Pier 49 was a skeletal structure of rotting wood and rusted metal, jutting out into the cold, grey waters of the bay. Abandoned warehouses stood like silent tombstones along the shore. Kaelen parked a mile away, his every NCT screaming that this was a trap. This is a mistake, he said, his hands gripping the steering wheel. I should have brought the entire pack. We could have surrounded them. And risked Leo getting caught in the crossfire? Elara shook her head. No. Darius wants to break you, to prove you're weak because you care. We have to be smarter. Kaelen turned to her, his golden eyes blazing with a terrifying mix of fear and love. Promise me something, Elara. If this goes wrong, if I tell you to run, you run. You don't look back. You don't try to be a hero. You get to safety and you find Isabel. Promise me. The desperation in his voice broke her heart. She saw the alpha, the warrior, stripped down to the core of a father terrified of losing his child. I promise, she whispered. They covered the remaining distance on foot, their footsteps silent on the damp ground. Kaelen's body was coiled like a spring, his senses stretched to their limits, scanning for any sign of an ambush. At the very end of the pier, a man stood with a small figure beside him. Even from a distance, Elara could see Leo's familiar jacket, could feel the waves of fear rolling off him. Kaelen Blackwood, a voice called out, smooth and mocking. So good of you to join our little family reunion. Darius was everything Kaelen was not. He was blonde, lean, with the sharp, polished beauty of a fallen angel. But his smile was a cold, cruel thing, and the way his hand rested on Leo's shoulder made Elara's skin crawl. Let the boy go, Kaelen commanded, his voice flat and deadly. Your fight is with me. Is it? Darius tilted his head, a predator playing with his food. I think my fight is with the fairy tale you're trying to sell. The mighty alpha, brought to his knees by a human songbird. It's pathetic. Elara felt Kaelen tense beside her, but she laid a calming hand on his arm. She's lovely, I'll give you that. Darius's pale eyes slid to Elara, filled with a disgusting hunger. But really, Kaelen, a diner waitress? Where is your pride? My pride is irrelevant, Kaelen's voice was like ice. What do you want? What I've always wanted, Darius said, his grip tightening on Leo, making the boy whimper. Your territory, your pack, your title. But first, I want to see you beg. The way I begged when you took everything from me. Papa. Leo's voice was thin with terror. Kaelen took a step forward, but froze when Darius produced a knife. The blade wasn't steel, it was a dull, gleaming silver. Not another step, Darius purred. Now, here is your choice, Alpha. The boy's life, or hers. He pointed the knife at Elara. Choose. Take me, Kaelen said immediately, his voice cracking. Let them both go, and I will submit. How noble, Darius mocked. But no, that's not the game. He gestured to Elara. Come here, little songbird. Let's see how much your melody is worth. Don't, Kaelen pleaded with her, his eyes filled with anguish. But Elara was already moving. She walked forward, her steps steady on the creaking wood, her heart a wild drum in her chest. She kept her eyes locked on Leo, sending him all the strength and love she possessed. Good girl, Darius murmured as she came within reach. Now we can. He never finished his sentence. The moment she was close enough, Elara didn't hesitate. She didn't try to fight. She threw herself forward, not at Darius, but at Leo, wrapping her arms around the boy and using her own body as a shield, spinning them both away from the silver blade. And in that single, selfless act, Kaelen's control shattered. The transformation was a blur of terrifying, beautiful power. There was no slow morphing, no painful cracking of bones. One moment, Kaelen stood as a man, his rage a visible aura around him. The next, a massive, black wolf, larger than any natural creature, was airborne. It crossed the distance between them in a single, powerful leap. Darius barely had time to raise the silver knife before 200 pounds of furious alpha wolf slammed into him, sending them both crashing through the wooden railing and into the churning, icy water below. The fight that erupted from the bay was a nightmare of snarls, splashes, and furious roars. Elara held Leo tightly, shielding his eyes, praying with every fiber of her being. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. Elara crawled to the broken edge of the pier, her heart in her throat. Kaelen floated in the water, back in his human form, one hand gripping a piling, the other holding Darius's unconscious body. Blood streamed from cuts on both men, but Kaelen's eyes were clear and aware as they met hers. "Help me get him up," he called, his voice strained. It took all of their combined strength to haul the unconscious Darius onto the pier. Kaelen climbed up after him, water streaming from his torn clothes, his wounds already knitting together before her eyes. "Why?" Elara gasped, breathless. "Why didn't you kill him?" Kaelen finished, gathering a trembling Leo into his arms. The little boy clung to his father, sobbing with relief. "Because you were watching. Because my son was watching. And because sometimes, mercy is a sharper weapon than death." In the distance, sirens began to wail. Their battle had not gone unnoticed. Kaelen cursed softly, then lifted Darius's limp form with one hand. "We need to leave. Now." "What about him?" Elara asked. "He'll live," Kaelen said. "And when he wakes, he will remember that I chose to let him live. The message will be clear to every pack that watches us." His golden eyes, full of a fierce, proud love, met hers. Quote, "Challenge my family again, and mercy will not be an option." As they hurried back to the car, Leo, safe in his father's arms, looked over at Elara. "Mama Elara," he whispered, the title now spoken with absolute certainty. "You saved me." Tears welled in her eyes. "You are my heart, Leo. I will always protect you." "Papa says wolves protect their pack," Leo said, his voice growing stronger. "Does that mean your pack now? Are you going to stay with us forever?" Elara looked at Kaelen, seeing the same vulnerable, hopeful question in his eyes that shone in his son's. She had faced down a werewolf alpha. She had thrown herself in front of a silver blade. She had seen the beast and the man, and she loved them both without condition. "Yes, Leo," she said, her voice strong and clear. "I am pack now." Kaelen's smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Forever," Elara confirmed. And as they drove away from the pier, away from the darkness, Elara knew with every certainty that she was finally, completely, home. The return to the compound was a somber, triumphant procession. Word of the confrontation had spread like wildfire through the pack channels, and as Kaelen's car pulled through the main gates, the entire community seemed to be waiting. They did not cheer. This was not a victory to be celebrated with shouts. It was a moment of profound significance, acknowledged with a deep, respectful silence. Wolves and their human family members stood side by side, their eyes fixed on their alpha, his son, and the human woman who had faced the abyss with them. Kaelen carried a sleeping Leo, who had finally succumbed to exhaustion, his small head nestled trustingly against his father's shoulder. Elara walked beside them, her hand resting lightly on Kaelen's arm, a gesture of solidarity and possession that did not go unnoticed. Isabel was the first to approach, her usual stern expression softened with something akin to awe. She bowed her head, not just to Kaelen, but to Elara. "The pack stands with you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you." One by one, the pack members followed suit. Ronan, the scarred warrior, placed his fist over his heart in a gesture of ultimate respect. Old Marcus smiled, his eyes twinkling with tears. Even the most skeptical, those who had watched Elara with guarded eyes, now looked upon her with a new understanding. She had not hidden. She had fought for one of their own with the only weapons she had, courage and love. Later, after Leo was safely tucked into his own bed, Kaelen led Elara to his private study. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls lined with books. "What you did today," Kaelen began, his voice rough with emotion as he stood before the flames. "No one, in all my ye. Ours, has ever. You put yourself between my son and a silver blade. He is my son too, Elara said simply, coming to stand beside him. A mother protects her child. It is the most natural law there is. The word, mother, hung in the air between them, a truth so powerful it felt like a physical force. Kaelen turned to her, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight. My wolf, he said, the part of me that is instinct and wildness, it has chosen you, Elara. It recognized you as its mate from the first moment you sang to our son. But the man needed to be sure. Today, you showed me the depth of your heart. You were not just my wolf's choice. You were my choice, my partner, my Luna. He didn't move to kiss her. Instead, he took her hands in his touch reverent. Will you stand by my side? Not behind me, but with me. As my equal, as the heart of this pack, as you have already become its soul? Tears streamed freely down Elara's face now, tears of joy, of acceptance, of a love so profound it felt like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. Yes, Kaelen, she whispered, her voice strong and clear. I will. He brought her hands to his lips, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her knuckles. It was a pledge, a vow, more intimate than any kiss on the lips could ever be. It was a promise of a future built together, on a foundation of unwavering trust and deep, abiding love. The following days were a whirlwind of new responsibilities and deepening bonds. Elara's official designation as the Luna was not announced with a grand ceremony, but it was understood. The pack's energy shifted, becoming more cohesive, more peaceful. Her presence was a balm, her gentle strength a counterpoint to Kaelen's formidable power. It was Marcus who sought her out one afternoon, finding her in the garden helping Leo with his reading. Luna, he said respectfully. Might I have a word? Of course, Marcus. She smiled, settling on a bench beside him while Leo practiced his letters in the grass. The pack is different with you here, the old wolf began, his wise eyes crinkling at the corners. Calmer, more centered. It is a gift we have not known since Kaelen's mother was alive. I'm just being myself, Elara said. That is precisely the gift, Marcus replied. What you possess, child, is something very rare. We call it the calm. It is an ability, often found in true Lunas, to soothe the wolf spirit. To bring peace to our more aggressive instincts. It is why Leo responded to you so powerfully. It is why the pack relaxes when you sing. Elara stared at him, the pieces finally clicking into place. The immediate effect of her lullaby, the way the entire room had stilled. I thought it was just a nice voice. It is a power, Marcus said gently. A gentle one, but a power nonetheless. And it is why you are so vital to us. An alpha provides strength and direction. A Luna provides stability and heart. With you, our alpha is complete. Our pack is whole. The weight of his words settled on her, not as a burden, but as a purpose. She had spent her life feeling like she didn't belong, her gift for comfort seeming small and insignificant. Now, she understood it was her greatest strength. It was the key to helping this family, this pack, heal and thrive. She began her training in earnest, not in combat, but in leadership. Isabel taught her pack politics and history. Ronan showed her how to read the subtle body language of wolves, to understand their hierarchies and disputes. Kaelen shared the weight of his decisions, asking for her counsel, valuing her human perspective. One evening, as they reviewed maps of their territory, a notification came through on Kaelen's secure line. He read it, his expression growing grim. The Northwest Supernatural Council has taken notice, he said, looking up at her. My unconventional choice of a human Luna has sparked debate. They have requested our presence. They wish to evaluate you. Elara's stomach fluttered, but she met his gaze steadily. Then we will show them. We will show them that a pack led by both strength and compassion is not weak. It is the future. Kaelen's proud smile was all the confirmation she needed. The challenge ahead was daunting, but they would face it as they faced everything now. Together. The council chambers were held in a grand, ancient lodge hidden deep within a national forest, protected by powerful glamours from human eyes. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the power of countless supernaturals. Werewolf alphas from a dozen packs sat in a semicircle, their betas standing behind them. Among them were also representatives from the vampire conclave and the Phi courts, their ancient, watchful eyes taking in every detail. Elara walked in beside Kaelen, her head held high. She wore a simple, elegant dress of deep blue, a color that mirrored Kaelen's eyes when his wolf was close to the surface. She felt the weight of their stares, the skepticism, the curiosity. The presiding elder, a formidable female alpha named Serafina, opened the session. Kaelen Blackwood, you have always been a traditionalist, a pillar of our old ways. Your choice of a human Luna is perplexing. This council requires an explanation. Kaelen stepped forward, his voice echoing with authority. I chose not a human, Elder Serafina. I chose Elara Vance. Her species is irrelevant. Her character is everything. She has brought stability to my pack, healed my son, and faced a direct threat from a rival alpha with a courage that shames many in this room. A murmur rippled through the assembly. An alpha from a northern pack, a brute of a man named Goran, stood. Courage is meaningless without strength. What happens when your territory is challenged? When your pack needs a leader who can fight? Will she hide behind you while your warriors bleed? Before Kaelen could respond, Elara stepped forward. She did not speak to Goran, but to the council as a whole, her voice calm and clear, carrying through the vast hall without effort. A leader's role is not to be the strongest fighter, but to ensure the pack itself is strong, she said. My strength lies in unity. In understanding. When two of our pack members recently disputed a border patrol, the old way would have been a dominance fight. I mediated. I listened. I discovered the dispute was not about territory, but about respect for a fallen comrade. By addressing the true wound, we healed the conflict without a single blow being struck. Pretty words, Goran scoffed. And when mediation fails, when an enemy is at your gate with silver and fire, then, Elara said, turning her steady gaze upon him, I will stand beside my alpha and my pack. I will tend the wounded, protect the young, and hold the heart of our community steady so that our warriors can fight without fear for what they leave behind. A pack that only knows how to fight is a pack already dying. A pack that knows how to heal, to build, to care, that is a pack that will endure forever. Silence fell. Serafina studied her, a slow, thoughtful smile spreading across her aged face. You speak of the pack as a living, breathing entity, she said. Not just a hierarchy of power. This is an old wisdom, one many have forgotten. She looked around the chamber. This council recognizes Luna Elara of the Silverwood pack. Let her methods be watched. Let her success, or failure, be a lesson to us all. It was not a full-throated endorsement, but it was acceptance. It was a chance. As they left the lodge, Kaelen took her hand, his grip firm and sure. You were magnificent, he murmured. You did not convince them with threats, but with truth. We have our chance, Elara replied, looking back at the ancient trees. Now we must prove that love and leadership can build a legacy stronger than fear ever could. The peace that followed the council's judgment was fertile ground. Inspired by Elara's vision, Kaelen began to reach out to neighboring packs, not with threats, but with offers of alliance and mutual aid. The Eastwood pack, who had previously been neutral, agreed to a trade agreement. The Riverside pack, who bred the finest hunting dogs, began a joint training program with their trackers. The compound itself transformed. It was no longer just a fortress, it became a true community center. Elara started a school for the pack's children, both human and wolf-kin. She organized gatherings, fostering bonds between families that had previously kept to themselves. Her song became a regular part of their lives, a signal for the pack to come together, to share their day, to remember they were one family. One evening, as they watched the children, Leo included, playing a chaotic game of tag under the setting sun, Leo ran up to them, breathless and happy. Papa? Mama Elara? Can I call you Mama now? For always? Elara's heart swelled so large she thought it might burst. She knelt, pulling him into a tight hug. I would be honored, my little wolf. For always. Kaelen placed a hand on both of their shoulders, his touch saying everything his words could not. This was their family, forged in loss, strengthened by adversity, and built on a love that had rewritten the rules of their world. But in the perfect, peaceful twilight, a scout returned at a dead run, his face ashen. Alpha, Luna, forgive the intrusion, but there's been a sighting. Darius, he's not alone. He's gathered rogues, a lot of them, and they're moving fast. The peace was over. The final storm was coming. And this time, it would not be a skirmish on a pier. It would be a war for their very home. The compound mobilized with a terrifying, silent efficiency. Under Kaelen and Isabel's direction, every wolf had a role. Defensive positions were reinforced. The elderly and the very young were moved to the deep, concrete-reinforced panic room beneath the main house. Weapons were distributed, not just guns with silver bullets, but traditional arms for those who fought best in their wolf form. Elara did not go to the panic room. "My place is here," she told Kaelen, her voice leaving no room for argument. She stood in the command center they had set up in the main living area, monitors showing camera feeds from around the perimeter. "I am the Luna. My duty is to the heart of the pack, and the heart is not meant to be hidden." Kaelen saw the resolve in her eyes and knew better than to fight her. He simply nodded, his trust in her absolute. "Then you coordinate from here. You are our center. You are our calm." The attack came just after midnight. It was not a subtle probe. It was a hammer blow. Dozens of wolves, led by a visibly changed Darius, his once handsome face now marred by a silvery scar from their last fight, surged from the tree line. They were not disciplined like Kaelen's pack, they were a horde of rage and desperation. The night erupted into chaos. Snarls and the clash of bodies, the sharp crack of gunfire, the battle cries of wolves and men. Elara watched the screens, her heart in her throat, directing reinforcements where they were needed, relaying information, her voice a steady, calming presence over the comms. But Darius's strategy, why, became clear. He was not trying to win a fair fight. He was creating diversions, drawing Kaelen's forces thin, while a small, elite group of his most vicious rogues broke through a weak point in the western perimeter. Their target was not the armory or Kaelen. Their target was the main house. Their target was her. "Kaelen, they're coming for me," she said into her calm, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "I'm coming." His voice was a snarl of static and fury. "Hold on." But she could see on the monitors he was pinned down, surrounded by a swarm of rogues. He couldn't get to her in time. The front door splintered with a deafening crash. 3 massive wolves, their eyes glowing with feral madness, stalked into the command center. Saliva dripped from their jaws. They fanned out, surrounding her. Elara stood her ground. She had no weapons, no physical strength to match them. But she had her gift. She had her love for this pack. She closed her eyes for a brief second, finding the core of peace within herself. Then, she began to sing. It was not the gentle lullaby for a child. It was the ancient Gaelic melody her grandmother had taught her, but she sang it with all the power of her soul. She sang of hearths and home. Of loyalty that never broke. Of a love that was stronger than any claw or tooth. The effect on the rogue wolves was immediate and jarring. They faltered in their advance, shaking their massive heads as if trying to dislodge a fly. The bloodlust in their eyes flickered, replaced by confusion, by a fleeting memory of a time before they were outcasts, of a time they might have had a pack, a home. It was only a hesitation, but it was enough. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the house, Kaelen exploded through the window, glass shattering around him like rain. He was in his full wolf form, a magnificent, terrifying beast of shadow and fury. He moved between Elara and the rogues, a living wall of protection. The fight was short, brutal, and decisive. Kaelen's rage, fueled by the threat to his mate, was a force of nature. The rogues were no match for a fully realized alpha defending his heart. When it was over, Kaelen shifted back, his chest heaving, his body covered in superficial cuts. He didn't even look at the defeated rogues. His eyes went straight to Elara. She was still standing, unharmed, her song faded into the sudden silence. Her eyes met his, filled not with fear, but with a fierce, triumphant love. In that moment, as the rest of the pack secured the compound and the sounds of battle died away, every wolf present understood. Their Luna had not been protected. She had held the line. She had used her gift as a weapon of defense, and in doing so, had proven herself not as a weakness, but as the pack's greatest strength. Rias was found trying to flee, his coalition broken, his ambition shattered. He was brought before Kaelen and Elara in the main courtyard, as the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. "Kill me," Darius spat, his defiance a brittle shell. "Get it over with." Kaelen looked at Elara. The decision was not his alone. Not anymore. Elara looked at the broken Alpha, at the pain and jealousy that had twisted him into a monster. She saw not an enemy to be destroyed, but a warning. No, she said, her voice carrying in the crisp morning air. Your punishment is not death. It is to live with the knowledge that you failed. That hatred could not break what love has built. You are banished. If you are ever found in our territory again, or that of any allied pack, the sentence will be death. But today, you are shown mercy. Remember it. The pack watched, their respect for their Luna solidifying into something unshakable. She had the strength to be ruthless, but the wisdom to be compassionate. As Darius was led away, a defeated shell of a man, the pack began to gather around Kaelen and Elara. They were tired, wounded, but victorious. The air was filled not with the euphoria of battle, but with the deep, quiet joy of survival, of a family preserved. Leo ran out from the safe room and straight into Elara's arms. Mama, you're okay? She held him close, breathing in the scent of her child. We're all okay, my love. We're all together. Kaelen stood beside them, his hand on Leo's shoulder, his eyes locked with Elara's. The rising sun cast a golden halo around them, the Alpha, the Luna, and the little wolf who had brought them together. You were right, Kaelen said softly, for her ears only. Love is not a weakness. It is our greatest power. Elara smiled, leaning into his strength. It is the only power that truly lasts. The war was over. The challenges would continue, as they always do. But as the Silverwood pack stood together in the dawn, they knew they were no longer just a collection of individuals. They were a family, bound by something stronger than blood or law. They were bound by a song that had tamed the wildest of hearts, and a love that had conquered the darkest of nights. Their story was just beginning, and its melody would echo for generations to come. The days following the battle were a testament to the pack's resilience. The compound, though scarred, hummed with a renewed sense of purpose. Wounds, both physical and emotional, were tended to with a care that spoke of a deep, familial bond. Elara moved among her people, her presence a living balm. She sat with the injured, her quiet conversations and occasional soft humming accelerating healing in a way that mystified even their oldest healers. She was not just their Luna. In title, she was the heart around which their recovery pulsed. Kaelen watched her, his awe a constant, warm ember in his chest. He had built this pack on strength and discipline, but she was weaving through it the threads of compassion and connection, making it stronger than he had ever dreamed possible. The decision to spare Darius, however, sent ripples far beyond their territory. It was a move so counter to their world's brutal logic that it became a subject of intense discussion among the supernatural communities. A week after the attack, a delegation from the Eastwood pack arrived, led by Alpha David Chen and his Luna, Sarah. They were received not in the formal meeting hall, but in the main family room, where the scent of pine and baking bread filled the air, a deliberate choice by Elara to foster kinship over politics. Your mercy toward Darius was unexpected, Alpha Kaelen, David began, his tone carefully neutral as he accepted a cup of tea. It was not my decision alone, Kaelen replied, his gaze shifting to Elara, who sat beside him, her hand resting comfortably in his. It was the judgment of your Luna. Sarah leaned forward, her intelligent eyes fixed on Elara. Many see it as a sign of weakness. They whisper that the Silverwood pack has gone soft. Elara met her gaze, her expression serene. And what do you believe, Luna Sarah? I believe, Sarah said slowly, a smile touching her lips, that it takes a different kind of strength to offer a hand where others would wield a blade. The rogues you captured, they did not just slink away in defeat. Some have asked to swear allegiance. They speak of a song that reminded them of what a pack should be. A stunned silence filled the room. Rogues, by their very nature, were wolves who had rejected pack law. For them to seek entry into the pack that had defeated them was unprecedented. It is her, Marcus, who had been quietly observing, spoke from his chair by the fireplace. The calm. It does not merely soothe. It calls the lost home. David Chen looked from the old wolf to Elara, his skepticism giving way to dawning realization. You are building something new here. Not just a pack, but a sanctuary. Is that not what a pack should be? Elara asked softly. A sanctuary for its members? A place where strength is used to protect, not just to dominate? The visit ended with more than a renewed alliance. it ended with the Eastwood pack pledging closer ties, a desire to learn from this new model of leadership. As their car disappeared down the driveway, Kaelen turned to Elara, his golden eyes shining with a profound love. "You are changing the world," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "No," she corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. "We are. Together." But even as their influence grew, a shadow of the old world lingered. The mercy shown to Darius had been a calculated risk, and not all saw it as wisdom. In the dark corners where tradition festered into tyranny, new threats were already beginning to stir, waiting for a moment of perceived weakness. The integration of the former rogues was Elara's next great challenge. They were a skittish, scarred group of 5, their wolves restless and their trust in authority non-existent. The main pack watched them with open suspicion, especially Ronan, whose loyalty to Kaelen was absolute and unforgiving. Elara insisted they be treated not as prisoners, but as potential members. She assigned them tasks, ate meals with them, and learned their names and stories. She saw the pain behind their aggression: wolves cast out for minor infractions, others who had fled abusive alphas. One, a young female named Lyra, was particularly hostile. She had been Darius's most fervent follower, and her bitterness was a poison she wore like armor. "You think your pretty songs and kind words can fix us?" Lyra sneered one afternoon as Elara brought them fresh linens. "You're a naive human playing house with monsters." Elara didn't flinch. She set the linens down and met Lyra's furious gaze. "I do not see monsters. I see wounded souls. And I am not trying to fix you. I am offering you a choice. You can cling to the anger that defines you, or you can help build something new. I don't need your pity." Lyra snarled, her eyes flashing yellow. "This is not pity." Elara's voice remained calm, but a core of steel shone through. "This is respect. The choice to be better is the hardest fight any of us will ever face. I am simply telling you that you do not have to fight it alone." She turned and walked away, leaving Lyra staring after her, the first crack appearing in her wall of rage. The true test came during the first full moon after their arrival. The tension in the compound was palpable. A full moon heightened all wolf instincts, and the presence of unstable, new wolves was a recipe for disaster. As the moon rose, a massive, silvery orb in the black velvet sky, the pack gathered in the secured clearing for the run. It was a night of primal freedom, but tonight, it was also a night of vigilance. Kaelen, in his magnificent wolf form, led the run, his power a stabilizing beacon. But when Lyra shifted, her wolf was a frantic, chaotic thing. The scent of the pack, the raw energy of the moon, overwhelmed her control. With a furious snarl, she broke from the group and lunged not at a pack member, but toward the tree line where the human members of the pack, including the children, were watching safely from a distance. A collective gasp of horror went up. Kaelen was too far away. Ronan and the other warriors were on the other side of the clearing. But Elara was not. She did not run. She did not scream. She stepped directly into Lyra's path, placing herself between the frenzied wolf and the vulnerable. "Lyra," she said, her voice not a shout, but a command that carried on the night air, clear and unwavering. The massive wolf skidded to a halt, confused by the lack of fear. Elara began to sing. It was the same ancient melody, but tonight, it was not a lullaby. It was a shield, a wall of pure, resonant calm that flowed from her and wrapped around Lyra's enraged wolf. She poured every ounce of her love for this pack, her determination to protect it, into the song. Lyra whimpered, shaking her head, the fight draining from her muscles. The wild yellow of her eyes faded, replaced by a dazed, bewildered blue. She lowered her head, a submissive gesture, and then collapsed, shifting back into her human form, sobbing uncontrollably in the grass. The clearing was utterly silent, save for Elara's fading song. Every wolf, including Kaelen, looked upon their Luna with a reverence that bordered on the religious. Kaelen shifted and strode to her side, pulling her into a fierce, wordless embrace. He had seen her courage before, but this was different. This was the power of a Luna in its purest form, the power to command without violence, to protect without causing harm. Ronan approached Lyra, not with anger, but with a hand extended to help her up. The look he gave Elara was one of absolute, unwavering loyalty. The last bastion of skepticism had fallen. Elara had not just tamed a rogue wolf. She had proven, beyond any doubt, that her humanity was not a limitation. It was their pack's greatest weapon. The story of the taming of Elara spread through the supernatural world like wildfire, morphing from fact into near legend. The Northwest Supernatural Council could no longer simply watch. A formal summons arrived, embossed with the official seal, demanding the presence of Alpha Kaelen and Luna Elara for a review of unconventional practices. The atmosphere in the car to the council lodge was tense. Kaelen's jaw was set, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "They will try to break you," he said, his voice grim. "They will use your humanity against you. They will claim you are a danger to our secrecy, to our very way of life." Elara placed a calming hand on his arm. "Then we will show them a new way of life. We will not defend. We will demonstrate." The council chamber was even more intimidating than before. The semicircle of alphas and other supernatural leaders seemed larger, their collective gaze heavier. Elder Serafina presided, her expression unreadable. "Luna Elara," Serafina began, her voice echoing in the hushed hall. "Your methods are disruptive. You integrate rogues. You challenge the primal dominance that has governed our kind for millennia. There are those on this council who believe your calm is a form of manipulation, a danger to the natural order." Alpha Goran stood, his bulk casting a long shadow. "I said it before. She is a vulnerability. Her human sentimentality will be the downfall of any pack that follows her lead." "How can you lead wolves when you are a sheep?" A murmur of agreement rippled through some of the traditionalists. Elara stood. She did not step forward to the center, but remained at her place beside Kaelen, a picture of partnership. "Elder Serafina, honored members of the council," she began, her voice clear and resonant. "You speak of the natural order. But what is more natural than a mother protecting her child? What is more natural than a community caring for its wounded? What is more natural than offering a second chance to those who have lost their way?" She paused, letting her words sink in. "You call my methods disruptive. I call them a return. A return to the understanding that a pack is not just a hierarchy of power, but an ecosystem of strength. The warrior's strength is vital, yes. But so is the healer's touch. So is the teacher's patience. So is the mother's love. A pack that honors only one kind of strength is a pack that has already begun to die." She turned her gaze to Goran. "You ask how a human can lead wolves. I do not lead by tooth and claw. I lead by heart and soul. I lead by reminding every member of my pack, from the strongest warrior to the smallest child, that they are valued. That they belong. And a wolf who knows it belongs will fight for its pack with a loyalty that can never be broken by force." She looked around the chamber, her eyes meeting each skeptical gaze. "I am not a sheep. I am a songbird, and my song is not one of weakness. It is the song of the hearth fire that calls the hunters home. It is the song that reminds the wolf of the family it protects. That is not a danger to our kind. It is our salvation." The silence that followed was profound. It was broken by Serafina, who slowly began to applaud. It was a soft, solitary sound that was soon joined by others. Not everyone, Goran and his allies sat in stony silence, but by many. Elder Serafina stood. "The council has heard you, Luna Elara of the Silverwood Pack. Your words carry an old truth, one we have been foolish to forget. The review is concluded. Your pack will be recognized as a sanctioned sanctuary for rehabilitation. Your methods will be studied." It was a victory. A monumental one. As they walked out, Kaelen looked at Elara, his heart so full of pride and love he thought it might burst. "You did not just answer them," he whispered, his hand finding hers. "You taught them." The journey home was filled with a quiet, triumphant hope. They had faced the highest authority of their world and had not just been accepted, they had been endorsed. The path forward was clear. But as their car descended from the mountains, a single, encrypted message flashed on Kaelen's phone. It was from a deep-cover scout. "Movement in the shadows. A new player. They call themselves the Purists. They do not approve of the Council's decision. They see the human Luna as an abomination that must be cleansed. They are gathering. They are coming." The peace they had fought so hard for was fragile. A new, more insidious enemy, born of hatred and fear, was rising. And their target was not the Alpha or the Pack, but the Songbird at its heart. The threat of the purists did not vanish overnight. It was a shadow that lingered, a whisper on the wind for many months. But the Silverwood Pack, now a beacon of a new era, stood unwavering. Alliances forged in understanding, not fear, proved stronger than any weapon of hatred. When the purists finally made their move, they found not a single pack to target, but a united front of werewolves, and even voices from the fae and vampire communities, all standing guard over the human Luna who had reminded them what they were truly protecting. The confrontation was not a war, but a dissolution. Faced with the undeniable strength of a community built on compassion, the purists' ideology crumbled. Some were captured and, following Elara's unwavering principle, were given the same choice she had offered Lyra: redemption or exile. Most, seeing the world they could be a part of, chose to stay. Years flowed into years, like a gentle, persistent river smoothing the edges of stone. The Silverwood compound was no longer just a sanctuary for wolves, but a living school of a new philosophy. Packs from across the continent sent their young Lunas and potential leaders to learn from Elara, not just about the calm, but about diplomacy, unity, and the quiet, formidable strength of the heart. Leo grew into a remarkable young man, the very best of both his parents. He possessed his father's steady strength and his mother's empathetic soul. When his own wolf emerged, it was not with the chaotic fury some feared, but with a calm, powerful certainty. He was a bridge, a living testament to the future his parents had built. On the evening of his official ceremony to be named heir to the Alpha title, the entire pack gathered in the flower-filled courtyard. Kaelen, his hair now touched with distinguished silver at the temples, stood with his arm around Elara, who radiated a beauty that time had only deepened. As Leo pledged his life to the pack, his voice strong and clear, Kaelen leaned down and whispered to Elara, his words for her alone. "You see?" he murmured, his golden eyes, still so full of fire, soft with a love that had only grown. "You sang a song for one lost little boy. And it healed an entire world." Elara smiled, leaning into his strength, as she had every day since she first walked into his life. She looked out at their pack, at the warriors like Ronan who now led with wisdom, at Isabel who had become a devoted aunt to Leo, at Lyra who now taught young wolves to find peace in their own skin, at the human children and wolf kin playing together without distinction. Her gaze then fell upon the old Moonlight diner, visible in the distance, now transformed into a thriving community center that served as the public face of their humanitarian outreach, a symbol of the bridge between their world and the human one. "No, my love," she whispered back, her hand finding his. "I simply sang the first note. It was our family, our pack, that turned it into a symphony." Later, as the stars blanketed the night sky, the pack fell into a comfortable silence. And from the heart of their home, a melody began to rise. It was Elara's song, the same ancient lullaby. But now, it was not only her voice. It was joined by the soft hum of the entire pack, a harmonious, resonant sound that wove through the trees, climbed the mountains, and spilled out into the night. It was a song of protection. A song of belonging. A song of a love so profound it had rewritten destiny. It was the song of the Silverwood Pack. And it would echo, forever. The end.